Right.
And he was released 6 months to the day.
Wild.
Yeah. So these things do work, and it's all documented in history and, cases and everything like that, which you will find in law books.
Mm-hmm.
So, by listening to Greg, he had a guest on, a guy called Christian Walters, and
Yeah, he rings.
Sorry?
He rings a bell. I recognise the name.
Yeah. People had kind of been edging towards trusts, but not really seriously looking at them, just kind of, there's these things called trusts, and the birth certificate might represent a trust, and it seems to, and everything like that.
Yeah. I remember Foreign Siders Trust in, is it the Sesticare v Act or some description?
Yeah, it's all internal, even equity is all internal. It's all UK derived, what's between men is between men. If you want to bring an action to the court, then, what you're basically doing is you're setting up a court. Well, whose court do you want to set up to? Because you could basically, be in the pub and you could have a bit of a chat about things or whatever, and people will lend their opinions to it, and, you come up with a solution there without involvement from the state.
Yeah, that's it.
Or there may be family issues or whatever, but they're all demonstrating all private remedies,
That's it. So I know I've heard you mention before that common law tends to lack a specific remedy or a good solution to certain problems in law, and I think you might have mentioned this when you were talking about the history, a little bit of history, and how trusts were used, many years ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what can you tell us about the history of trust? How recent is it exactly, or how far does it go back?
It goes back at least to before Christ, in Roman times,
Mm-hmm.
They didn't exactly use trusts, but they used a very similar thing called fideicommisum.
Right.
Which is basically the same thing. It's just under Roman law rather than under equity. And then when the Normans came to England, that system was foreign to England.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it had been here before, I'm not too sure, but there was obviously, law forms like Teutonic law, which is from the German law.
Yeah.
And the people would basically sort things out themselves, and it didn't really involve citizens of Rome.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess,
and then,
sort of like appointed members of the community to make and suggest solutions to certain problems.
Exactly, it would usually be the elders,
Yeah.
Yeah, because most of the things that people had on a day-to-day basis would be pretty much, stuff that they were rearing, stuff that they dug, mines or whatever. Just general stuff, nothing really too crazy and methodical. They didn't have internet, so you couldn't have, internet fraud, or, they didn't have cars or planes, all these, modern things. They just had, a simple living. So, I suspect remedies were quite simple.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of the time would be spent, practicing juggling or magic or, all these ancient things, ancient customs and rites and ceremonies.
Yeah.
Just to make things a little bit more prettier and happy.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So now everyone's got jobs, and they're all using these debt instruments as payment. There's that word as again.
It's everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah. And they may not necessarily be understanding what they're doing when they set up businesses or go into a job. But basically, once you put pen to paper, you're now acting as a fiction.
Yeah.
And that's where all your rights go out the window, and the only rights that you've got is matched by your scope of office.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And that's why it's easy to get fired or to get threatened or whatever, because, you've basically agreed to the stipulations in the terms and conditions of the job that you've agreed to undertake.
Yeah, you've signed up to the rules of that corporation, haven't you?
Which makes you a trustee.
Really? All right. Okay.
Yeah, because you're held accountable for something that you're holding. Well, you're holding a position.
Right. I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like a job title, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an intangible asset to someone who owns the company,
Mm-hmm.
Or assumed to own the company. Little does he know that he doesn't own anything, like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether he claims it or not. Yes, thanks, yeah.
Before the break, we were chatting about title a little bit in terms of trust and employment, and how when you sign your employment contract, that creates a trust, and the member of staff turns out to be the trustee. Is that right?
Yeah, they've got a fiduciary duty.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's entrusting them to hold that position. So you couldn't get much more trust language than that,
Yeah, absolutely. What makes up a trust? Because for anyone that's not 100% familiar with it, how is a trust formed, and what makes up a trust?
A trust is you've got someone who needs something doing and can't really do it themselves. Generally, trust sort of grew out of people who were dying, and they wanted their last will and testament, the last thought and wish to be kept. So even though they weren't here,
Mm-hmm.
they could have a means to still be remembered, for the wishes, like.
So that would be like the trustees of an estate, is it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, he'd be the grantor, and he'd give it to the trustee, he'd give the responsibility to the trustee.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the trustee would then administer or manage, the account or the property, for the beneficiary, and the beneficiary can basically, depending on the conditions that are set upon him, like, for example, Lisa Marie Presley, she was left money by Elvis at 21, at like 35, and, whatever other age, because she was deemed then to be competent enough to handle, such substantial amounts of money.
Yeah.
Well, she's the beneficiary, and there are conditions then on her dowry, and the trustee would be the lawyers who are administering the trust for her. So they'd be putting that money into investments, on the stock exchange or whatever, and they'd be trying to increase the dowry that she'll get. So they're doing their fiduciary duty, withholding the money until she reaches age, investing the money and not losing the money. So they would be operating in the securities market and using the money that she's got in the bank accounts or whatever, estates, whatever, as collateral for the securities that are traded, to make more money for the vest, which is the estate, like.
What would happen if they sort of messed up and started losing money? Or were they, just hypothetically, obviously.
Yeah, well, it'd be secured anyway.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the money from the fund that they'd be operating with. It'd be used as collateral for securities. So it'd be the securities that would fail to make money, if you like. But the collateral, the money, would remain. There's another classic one, Pele. He, when he retired from football the first time, about 4 years before that, he'd set up a construction company, and he'd left people in charge of, doing his, the business to make money for when he retired.
Right, yeah.
And he thought everything was going swimmingly, but little did he know that they were going out, casinos, restaurants and everything like that, while he was touring the world playing football. And he came back and he had like so many £1 million worth of debt.
That's terrible.
And that's why he had to come out of retirement and play in America for them last few years.
I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, I read that in his autobiography. Yeah, so if he'd have come in at trust law, he could have held them to ransom, but I'm not sure what happened, like whether there was a court case. I imagine there would be. But he basically got stung.
Yeah.
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 So in law, like, if something's recognised as a trust, it has to be treated as a trust, which is all about jurisdictions in the court, then, which courts are going to administer the account there.
So there must be, there must be a lot of, are there a lot of statutes that govern what goes on with trusts?
Yeah, there's quite a few. Yeah, there's some important ones, yeah. There's the Judicature Act of 1868 or 1863, something like that, 1868 and then 1873, I think it was an amended one.
Right.
And then there's the 1925 Trustees Act. Then there's the 1996 Recognition of Trusts Act. They're substantial, but equity, there's actually, and you can watch it on YouTube, there's a Charles Dickens novel called Bleak House.
Right, yeah.
Which is all about trusts and the Court of Chancery, which operates in equity and is, above law type of thing.
Bleak House, I'll have to give that a look.
It's about 40 episodes long, but it's worth it.
Wild.
Yeah.
So I think I remember Chancery Court. This relates to equity, doesn't it?
Yeah, equities in every court, but the Court of Chancery will deal with equitable remedies. So
and it doesn't know what's going on with how would you describe what equity in terms of trust? What does it mean exactly?
It's God's law.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens was when the Normans came and they took the Doomsday Book, they filled the Doomsday Book.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which was for taxpayers then to continue paying tax. Then the churches wanted land because they brought with them a Roman law system which was foreign to England.
Yeah.
And the church wanted to set up in places, but the way the church operates, it wants to hold land forever.
Right.
And in England, under English law, no one can hold the land, So the ecclesiasts were like, oh, what are we going to do now? So they formed equity, which was God's law, which is why it's higher than the king, because the king is answerable to the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
And that became what's known as equity. Like when you think about ecclesiastical, you've got that ek in there.
Yeah.
And they were all French, so equity, kind of the etymology on that one, like.
And it's all about conscience, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of the time the courts of chancery were held at the court of the king.
Mm-hmm.
And solely there because the king was the representative of God.
Yeah. And
the people would draw upon his conscience, to make fair decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had 12 district judges who would travel up and down the country to hear different cases in his stead, Are
they similar to, like, circuit judges at the present time?
Exactly, yeah.
All right.
As the population grew, the need grew more, and, so there was need for more judges.
Yeah, too right.
Yeah.
In the past, do you know if any people in the past have sort of started using remedies in trust to sort of fight back, like people are now starting to do at the minute?
Well, Howard Hughes is the classic case, really.